Preparing to live stream the meeting. Setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. Redirecting to YouTube. All right, there is the URL.
Yep.
So what I'm going to do is, for the moment, I'm going to
And this is, now she can help me figure out how, oh God, I do look like a white guy.
What are you supposed to look like?
That's good. My wife called me Birdman because my nose.
That's true love. Okay, I'll believe that.
I'm just telling you, that's funny. I'm just, we kind of had a weird also.
If we have weird lives, we have nothing to do. Okay, so.
Welcome.
Those it there.
Welcome, my prestigious honorable compliment.
Are you okay?
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna be on YouTube's live stream.
Well, you
Okay.
can be there. I'll be here.
Okay.
Oops, sorry.
You don't think about it so long?
No, I won't.
How do we get
Your documents. after that.
Is Anna gonna be here?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hannah.
I think so.
Okay. Okay. Todd, I just need a minute. I'll be right back.
So we'll have to somehow squish this to allow the things to the side. We weren't gonna put like.
Hey, bud, how you
documents up, I
doing?
was just gonna allow it to
Just-
stream in, but now she said, well, maybe I put the documents on.
Put it
I don't-
on side. I was not aware.
Anyways,
I hope I got the information out.
Yes.
See, now it's on the website, you click on it and.
And it goes on.
Yes, I did.
Is that what you were asking for?
Yeah.
And there's still some ports that Garrett's got to
Do we-
work out,
you
but
know-
we got it set up.
That's why we have to do it internally.
The volume of these aren't on yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just.
Good evening, honorable. But he's here. Honestly, I didn't. I'm like, I'm not presiding over. Good evening, honorable.
Oh, okay.
So that we can give her a report.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
You can't. Right next to there. Look at your gun.
Oh, I think I'm honorable. You're gonna say honorable. I'm like, no, the mayor's here.
Whoops.
The mayor's
Scared, Tony?
No, he made it, I
did made it for you.
I was like, oh, no.
Well, you gotta understand, I didn't use
Why? Nervous?
So good. I was admiring your little listening. Now you gave me this.
I just get.
I did pretty cool.
Okay, yeah, give it to the county.
That's only. You know what?
Attitude?
What's
What's that?
Okay.
But I didn't want to say it, because you probably not think that, or you was at it, you're sitting there looking at.
No.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, I talked to her. And she goes, what? It's just above, but I guess she saw the fire then. And I said, yes. It's BS. They were having this, they had a fire. Yeah, and so they're concerned. I'm showing in. Yeah, we have. That's the.
In a word.
Well, it's. A lot of time now. What she's gonna do is.
Uh-huh.
What I'm gonna do is touch it when I can, you know, and just make it kind of more.
Numbers.
And piecemeal it, and all.
Joe.
Yeah, I just don't know how we minimize it. If you want your document on there, well, I guess that's how you do it. Let's see. I'm not sure how you're gonna get, how you're gonna get documents. You wanna help me? Do you want your documents up here?
Do you?
Okay, I will find it.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, I can see
We're gonna do this actually a legit project. Not just like my step.
Yeah.
project.
I'm going like.
Okay.
Are they gonna come?
There's a
back?
little delay in the. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
Can you go down for a second? Just for a second. Keep going, keep going, keep going. See, guys, see underneath the where it says COVID-19, see it says watch tonight's budget workshop live stream. That's where you click. That's where you click. If you want to tell people in the future.
That'll be on.
And once,
all right.
I'm probably gonna die with I got asked to do stuff because they didn't have enough people to play dodgeball.
we'll go down further.
I was like, as long as I'm up.
Perfect. You like that?
I'm finished 90%.
So we're gonna do.
So that's all we got for the side view.
A mock
Can
game.
we expand the pictures a little bit? Or is
Do you
that-
want to see pictures?
not really?
Because really, the person who's on.
Oh, they
Zoom
have
will
their-
see
yeah,
the
there's a-
screen.
Okay, no, that's fine. But once.
No, no.
Do you not want to show the
Yeah, that's too.
No,
with
no,
the people on Zoom?
no, I do.
Oh, my goodness.
Because they don't have to see the. They can just see our face. When we don't have to share the recorder. The people on Zoom.
Oh, yeah, so we're getting.
Hey, Mayor,
Oh, yeah.
are you fine with, we don't have to, are you fine with sharing this on the screen on the wall rather than the actual document?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
It's gold.
It is.
Are we waiting for Shannon?
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Do this after.
Looking it up.
You got it?
The power of the
I can
signs.
switch with you because I.
Someone told her.
Something's done. Yeah, it goes-
Slipping.
Like,
You're slipping and you're not even.
But I wouldn't know.
Today, loaded.
No, I wouldn't either.
I'm nervous.
Are you?
Yes.
This is like your third one, isn't it?
Is it? I think
This
so.
is your third one. You're fine, you're not. All
It's
you literally
just- it's
just have
so
to say-
long.
you just have to say the numbers
Yeah.
They don't like
Yeah.
and they don't like.
Wow.
Not numbers.
Doesn't that pick it up? We were talking.
Oh, you-
Sound.
The owl picks it up.
But then again, we want South.
When I heard, when I was in Portland, I heard everything.
Was it pretty good?
Oh, I heard everything. Yeah.
But they're gonna wanna hear it. Or you do. It's recorded, by the way. It's on YouTube's live forever.
I got lost.
Testing. Okay, so that'll work for the crowd.
I got lost. This looks like the other street.
You had seen it before.
I can navigate
Yeah,
this. so
when
for
we
you.
go
Ah,
We have a lot of beer. We can have.
Ooh, she's ready.
Oh, yeah. I know, we haven't been seeing it. I think.
If you did the Pacific Northwest, it's really easy to drive it. I like driving.
I thought it was before.
I'm not a big fan of like, if you live. I know, I can't wait for people.
I don't know yet.
Like, you've been there?
I don't know. why. I've done like I think I was
Oh.
now that sounds like those two don't go together.
But it was like a little small. They have.
And then
Yeah, I do,
They have like.
I like, I am.
There's like all the.
Like I'm totally fine with that, but I understand.
They have like.
Especially about a like, don't want, like, when they don't feel.
Yeah.
Gee, nice. I would want.
Like.
And
Performing and.
felt heightened, but like I was afraid, but I was telling him.
So how would you?
Especially. Like, everyone's pointing it out. I remember that, we had so. And there's like, space.
Yeah, and those are like this, those are.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And the tent part. You got the.
Well, yeah, but that's why-
Oh, do that. Oh, hire you. I got it. Damn. I learned how to. Are you good?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So he had that, and I said, "What
You're
do you
nervous.
think?" Yeah, and he was like,
No.
"No."
I'm now they're mean. But do we really need a city administrator? That's all I got. I'll report that.
Of course, of course you do.
Never made a decision.
You need somebody to go.
Before I got ready to leave. Yeah. Well, we got. So you gotta be able to see that.
Yes.
I do. Yeah.
But what we do need is a plan.
I remember when we were first. Years in your practice that.
So we should be.
So, yeah.
People can see it from outside.
Yes, in case they don't.
No, it's like white. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of cool.
They got guns.
Wow.
What?
That kind of got
The whole pot
Oh, my goodness.
every day.
Oh, those are your,
It's just a habit. It's
like.
probably should get back.
Yeah.
And then also I think it's called the cellulose.
Yes.
There, it's got-
I didn't
well, but it's got a lot of good stuff in it too.
It's like 2 cups and a half.
It's got guarana in it, guarana. That's like real guarana.
You handed what?
Super evident.
Did you like it or?
All the loads.
It's great in the morning.
It's really good. It's just.
Yeah.
I mean, it has a lot of good, it has tea in it. And it doesn't have sugar. Sugar is something I don't like. I don't like sugar. I like the taste of it, but it's not something I like. It's good. It's not good for me. No, I'm just in general. Yeah, I don't like artificial sugar. But regular sugar, I don't. Too
It said.
pre-diabetic, you know.
That we would follow research. Because after that, because we were trying to do $3 million plus projects in 2 years.
Never saw it.
And then after that. And we're still looking at that. And we'll keep our eye on it.
Just to let you know.
Oh.
Just-
Yeah.
No, you can keep going.
Yeah. We're the one. And so, as soon as you read them around, they said this. But they know.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you saved myself. Oh,
You want up your hand free candy?
yeah. No, it's nice.
This one stresses.
What I do is I just sort of plug that stuff into the minutes and then I can flavor around my notes and just kind of, you know.
Most.
No, it's in the-
To me, I'm looking forward to it.
me first.
Breakfast is 10:45.
No, just bring.
Wait for this.
I'm
Oh, for like.
It's been a day meeting.
Speak after you get 3 hours.
He's very excited.
What's the name?
Yeah.
Huh?
And I said, you did go by the phone.
Unless you wanna go to.
Oh, interesting.
Just jumped in.
The barbecue or get ready.
I met him.
Make food super late at night.
I'm so excited.
No, that wasn't my, because it's, production. They finally did, production.
I'm glad you met him.
Yeah. Thank you. She got us some words.
Oh, sure.
That was good.
Yeah, it was like 9 p.m. They called for just when they called it was great.
Oh, okay. That is what I'm concerned. So when it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can they hear us now?
I
Is
think.
that picking it up? Make sure.
Yes, so as long as you listen to it. I mean, we've been on.
Okay, so just want to make sure that you're, can you hear me back there?
No,
No,
not.
let me get your.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You don't have to hold too long. That's like a second.
Unless it's just got. the value of the-
Okay.
Hi.
What is- Okay, good.
So you guys needed a different one?
I don't know.
New battery, get new batteries.
You could share with mine.
Let me try that.
All right. The line works.
There you go.
Or so you think.
The second number we have no.
That was so.
Oh.
No, and don't do this either. I'm gonna do it.
All right, we good? Welcome to the Wednesday special meeting of the Guadalupe City Council, July 15, 2022. May we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Ramirez,
Here.
Councilmember Cardenas,
Here.
Councilmember Costa Junior,
Here.
Councilmember Douglas,
Present.
Mayor Julian.
Here, will you please stand with me for a moment of silence and also after that pledge of allegiance? Again, a moment of silence for those in Ukraine and for those that we have wishes for. Thank you. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is community participation, and I'll read out the actual the notes on each person will be limited to a discussion of 3 minutes, or as directed by the mayor, pursuant to provisions of the Brown Act. No action will be taken on these items unless they are listed on the agenda, and unless certain emergency or special circumstances exist. City council may direct staff to investigate or subscribe or schedule certain matters for consideration at a future council meeting. I have 2 requests to speak. Is there anybody else that has a request to speak? That is, period. Request to speak?
Yes.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. And you're gonna hear beeps, because this is Matilda is gonna keep time.
Matilda.
First request is Cynthia Reyes.
Yeah, everybody hear me okay? Nothing. I'm a little short guy, so. Next. Nothing. Okay, good evening, city council members and members of the community. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Cynthia Reyes and I am vice president of the Guadalupe Firefighters Association and wife of engineer Reyes. Up until this point, I've been reluctant to come up here and speak due to the delicate matter of the fire department. Coming from a background in finance and construction, I absolutely understand budgets and the need to meet the bottom line. However, there is something that is being missed in these dialogues that I feel not only as my duty as vice president, but my duty as a wife and member of the community to shed some light on. As firefighters for the community, these men have set their personal life aside time after time to uphold the lives of this community. They've missed holidays, birthdays, and countless special occasions to be there 24/7 for you and your loved ones. Is it not enough for their families to have to worry if today's going to be the day they get the big call that they may not come home from? Is it not enough that they miss important events in their own lives to report for duty round the clock, that now those same families have to worry if today's the day that their spouse, son, or partner is going to get fired from the job that they've devoted their entire life to? The quick answer has continued to be, we are not going to dismantle the department. But when members are being written up for no reason, when they are being told they are not allowed to public events and can't speak up to HR to report misconduct, when they are being told you either take a pay cut or you walk, when they are being slowly mentally broken down to the point of wanting to quit and aren't even allowed to train on their own time with their own money, you tell me, what is the underlying message? The department is not a business. Overtime is not overtime when there is a refusal to hire additional personnel, but there still needs to be a crew round the clock to respond to calls. As it stands, the department only consists of 6 members, and you still expect them to not work overtime to provide round the clock care when every other department seems to have funds for raises and additional staffing. The budget for all public safety entities, for that matter, should not be a negotiable matter, regardless of the bottom line. People's lives should not be negotiable, especially in a community who may not otherwise be able to afford medical care. This community needs a department with qualified personnel. It is absolutely appalling that the city has chosen to pinpoint only certain members' salaries to try and prove a point of over expenditures. Because truly, if we wanted to talk about salaries, we should also take a look at the salaries and miscellaneous expenditures across all departments, not just fire. Let's talk about numbers though, because the solution really is simple. With a meek 18% of funds currently allocated to the fire department and a whopping 42% of the budget allocated to police, a 10% reallocation would leave the police department with a sizable budget of 32% and bring fire to a respectable budget of 28% to be able to hire additional staff to meet NFPA guidelines. Additionally, reallocating the vacant position of emergency preparedness coordinator to be positioned for a fire chief who may also perform emergency preparedness duties would give all parties the opportunity to fulfill their jobs accordingly. Bear in mind, what they are requesting is nothing more than the bare minimum required in this field, not only to protect the city appropriately, but also to put food on the table for their families. And bear in mind that any information was not here to dictate, but only to draw your attention to matters that were being contorted before being presented to you. And truthfully, council, I do not fault you. I only fault the foggy glasses that you are being made out to see out of. And I'm just wrapping up here. You as the council are public servants, just like these men. And maybe it's naive of me, but I still believe that you meant the oath you took to serve this community. And I believe that when given the opportunity to look beyond those foggy glasses, you will see that this isn't a matter of you versus them. It's only a matter of
Thank you.
working as an effective entity to serve your community as a unit.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. I'm gonna try to hold everybody in 3 minutes, so thank you. I know everybody's has a lot of heart into this, so I appreciate you adhering to that time. So next item, our next person is Ryan Mack.
I already timed the speech. I know it's gonna go over 3, so I'll try to make it as fast as possible.
Please stay up there, just can't.
Thank you very much.
You're on.
Council, all concerned. Hi, Quad Fire Captain here, off duty. I wanted to personally say thanks for having to sit through yet another speech of mine in as many days. I do have a clear objective tonight. In fact, it's never been clearer since all the pieces seem to fit now. I understand your concern regarding overtime. I hear your concern for reliable sources of revenue, and I appreciate your reluctance to participate in controversial politics. So tonight, I am bringing a truth promise. I promise on my reputation that everything I say here tonight is 100% factual, and may God himself strike me down if I lie about what I'm presenting. So let's get started. I have to cut a bit out because time, but it's been publicly stated that the fire department abuses overtime. Overtime is a simple math equation: manpower versus hours needed versus lack of coverage. Also noteworthy, all fire department is approved by the public safety director himself. GPD overtime is 3 times as much. Why is that not a problem? In fact, one sergeant at PD makes more than the public safety director himself and accrued 80,000 in overtime. Why is our 100,000 an issue? I can speculate it's a red herring, and it is a fake issue. It is the cost of safety. It is the cost of lives. You can put a cost on a house. How can you not put a cost on safety? Here are the real facts I have for you tonight. 5 total. 1, overtime is not a trigger word. It should make the council happy. The fire department made $220,000 in one incident last year, and the city profited $100,000. If we go to mutual aid fires, we will make you money. I have proof tonight, and I will leave it in the back for whoever wants it. 2, no firefighter took home $140K last year net. This is a number generated on the cost of the city for this employee. This doesn't account for taxes, 30%, medical and benefits, owed back pay, strike team monies, and hours worked. It's not apples to apples, it's apples to oranges. If the average civilian works a 40-hour week, they work 1,900 hours a year. The firefighter that made that money last year, the cost, worked between 3,000 and 4,000 hours. That's double what a normal person works. 3, if you all deny having threatened the fire department about going volunteer, then you have a rogue negotiator, and he needs to be let go. I also have proof of this tonight, and I will be leaving it in the back. His name is Shay Johnson. 4, we are the lowest paid fire department in the county. A salary survey conducted 2 years ago proves that and continues to this day. I also have proof available. Anybody's interested. Do I get paid less than the firefighters I command on mutual aid incidents? Yes. Do I complain? No. But I am not okay with pay cuts to existing positions. 5, public safety. The public state of public safety is priority number 1. This is a big one. How many votes do you need? How many votes do you need to convince you that this is what the public wants? We have a petition that says at least 500 more agree on top of the 80 that filled out that survey. If you hire a battalion chief in conjunction with an emergency preparedness coordinator, you're setting the city up for failure. A fire chief will not fix everything, that is true, but it is a step in the right direction. And my request is simple. Do what is right, not what is easy. The public is speaking and is now in your hands to decide if you'll listen, and I hope you do. Humbly yours, your current employee, Brian Danger Mack.
Mr. Charlie Martinez.
Good evening, Council. Charlie Martinez, Vice President, California Professional Firefighters Fifth District, and also a retired firefighter, Denver Air Force Base. He works side by side with Guadalupe Fire on several occasions. Just gonna give you attention to a letter sent to you by Julianne Hill from Taylor Farms, talking about a recent incident that they had in Salinas that could have resulted in catastrophic loss.
It's in the letters in the back too.
Right, letters in the back. Feel free to read up. That incident was fortunately mitigated before it got to be bad, because they have a full-time staff, Salinas Fire Department, that are absolutely on spot paid professionals. Now, what if that happened here in Guadalupe, with the staffing you have with your rigs, with the funding you have with your fire departments? That would have been a completely different scenario. Let me switch over to something more realistic, like a house. We have tons of houses, new housing being built all the time. A single room that catches fire, and this is again fact checking, Takes about 6 to 8 minutes before it flashes over. That means there's fire from the top to the bottom, wall to wall. And it's an unlivable, very dangerous scenario to go into and fight fire. So as firefighters, we have a 2 in 2 out policy for safety. And if you don't have proper staffing, you need to wait for the next engine to show up and then the next engine to show up after that. We already gone over the details on when Santa Maria or Santa Barbara County is going to be there on scene. By that time, that house is gone. Okay, so what do we put up price of the house? Oh, about 500, 600,000. Last time I talked to you guys, we talked about a life and what happened on medicals. You can't put a price on that. So I just asked that we do the right thing by our fire department. We're doing the right thing by our cops, giving some money, funding it, and that's great. The city needs it. Our firefighters also need that love. They also need that support. They also need that funding because God forbid we lose a house. That could be someone's livelihood where they live. God forbid somebody's inside that building. Now we're losing a life as well. Something to consider when you make a decision on funding. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Alvin Nunes?
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I just wanted to speak tonight, just to respond to the young woman's comments last night about overtime. Brian's already covered a lot of that footing, but the overtime that I understand that happens in the fire department is because it's part of an industry called constant manning. They're committed to be manned at all times. And overtime is created because you have X number of staff, and sometimes it's staff, while they're due for a shift, sick time, they're sick, a family member's sick, something calls them away from them being able to show up for their shift. So now you have to ask people that maybe have already on the shift to work another shift, or you have to call someone in who's already worked their allotment of hours that week. And now you have overtime. And it made sense to me when someone explained it to me. I was unsure where the information was coming from last night when the young woman was speaking, but then I thought, she's looking at numbers. She read out numbers and she said, this is how much it is, and look how much it is. And that's a big number. And that's something that you can etch away at. And well, actually, no, I don't think you can. The cost of doing business, of being constantly manned for the city, you cannot just etch away those numbers. They're there for a reason. That's all I wanted to say tonight. I didn't know who else was speaking, but I thought it was important to address that overtime isn't just a line item that you can explain away and delete. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else out there? We're gonna go into the 22-23 budget, proposed budget. So any other speakers? Okay, thank you. Now we're going to regular business fiscal year 2022-23 proposed budget for budget workshop. Right now, a lot of budget. Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and audience. On May 31st, City Council and city staff participated in a goal-setting session. One of the goals of the City Council was to have a balanced budget for the fiscal year and the priority to build up reserves. In an effort to better match the upcoming year's budget to the city's priorities, the city staff is hosting a budget workshop tonight. City staff has prepared a preliminary draft of the budget for the fiscal year. As part of the process, each department had an opportunity to evaluate and determine appropriate proposals to continue maintaining current levels of service. City staff seeks a recommendation from City Council as to how to finalize the budget and prioritize the use of the funds. We'll begin with the general fund. This is a summary. The preliminary draft of the budget includes estimated revenues of $6,761,712 and expenditures of $7,746,896. There's a graphic that shows the expenditures per department and compares to the budget from for the current year that we're in now, with a pie chart as well. If you go clockwise, it corresponds to the legend on the right. You have to go clockwise. City staff is seeking council's input as to what expenses should we prioritize and what expenses should be deferred to a subsequent fiscal year, consistent with the goal. The expenditures per the preliminary draft need to be reduced to the amount of revenue expected at a minimum to be break even. The difference between the budgeted revenues and the budget expenditures as it stands in this preliminary draft is $985,184. This is the gap that we're trying to work towards closing tonight. The budgeted expenditures per the preliminary draft will need to be reduced further if the city council would like to build additional reserves. Details on the budgeted revenue and departmental expenditures per this draft are explained below. So we'll start with the revenue. And it is in attachment 1, pages A1 through B1. Expected revenues as it relates to taxes per this proposed budget are $3,873,967, which is similar to the amount of the approved budget for the last fiscal year. City staff used a projection performed by HCL for sales tax and local sales tax revenue, which is our new measurement. This projection is in Exhibit A of the attachment 5. The projection shows sales tax revenue of $549,435 and measure in sales tax revenue of $691,731.
You just gotta speak into it directly.
Property tax revenue was projected by HCL as well. The projected property tax revenue for the fiscal year is $1,620,801, and it is in Exhibit B of the attachment 5. Remaining revenue items in this category for taxes were projected based on estimated revenue for the current fiscal year with data through April 2022. Expected revenues as it relates to building and planning for this proposed budget are $472,950, which represents a decrease of about 49% from the approved budget for the prior fiscal year. This is very significant as compared to the prior fiscal year, and the reason for it is because of the Pasadena development, and they do not plan on permitting out any lots in the upcoming fiscal year. It does include expected inflows from the Escalante Meadows development project, which was originally expected in the current fiscal year, but got pushed out to the next fiscal year. In addition, the city expects to receive remaining funding for the general fund update project from the LEAP and REAP grants. Expected revenue as it relates to public safety per the proposed budget are $338,500. Which is a decrease of 37% from the prior budget. The prior budget included an amendment which was done in the mid-year cycle to include the mutual aid reimbursement that was received. This proposed budget does not include a possible mutual aid participation as it is unknown at this time. The proposed budget includes the continuation of the school resource officer and airport contracts. The remaining revenue items in this category were budgeted similar to the prior fiscal year. Expected other revenue is projected at $1,065,023, which is an increase of 21% from the prior year budget. The proposed budget includes an estimate of $100,000 from cannabis. This was calculated by the city administrator based on HDL correspondence. The rental revenue was estimated based on current trends since the reopening of city facilities after the pandemic. The city expects to continue to receive the Chevron grant, although it is uncertain that this funding would continue after this next year. In addition, there's a line item for interest income on investment, but because rates are currently low, then that is estimated lower than the prior fiscal year. In regards to transfers, which is in attachment 1, page B1, into the general fund from other funds were estimated based on the draft calculation of the cost allocation study, which is Exhibit G of attachment 5. These will be updated once the cost allocation study is approved by council after the budget is finalized. The transfer from the successor agency fund for the general fund was updated to reflect the approved ROPS from the Department of Finance. The transfer from ARPA, which is attachment 4, is estimated to be $484,413 to fund certain expenditures and governmental services, which will be explained further in further detail below. Overall, the preliminary budget includes estimated revenues for the general fund in the amount of $6,661,712, which is a decrease of 4% as compared to the prior year budget. We'll start with the expenditures and we'll go department by department. For the council department, which is page C1, the budget for the council department per the preliminary draft is $12,680, which represents.
You just gotta speak. You guys speak directly.
Okay. Yeah.
No, it's working. It's just a
Okay.
matter of how you're talking to it.
Okay.
I mean, she has it like in her mouth, basically, so.
Like it goes in and out.
We
I'll
can,
look in mine.
Just give another one. see if-
Those two are not working.
Those two are
Okay,
not-
I'll try this one.
there you go.
I'll try that one.
The budget for the council department for the
Close.
preliminary draft is $12,680, which represents a 16% decrease from the approved budget for the prior fiscal year. Personnel services were calculated assuming the stipend amount would stay the same at $150 per month. JPIA provided an estimate for workers' comp insurance, which is Exhibit C of Attachment 5. And this shows workers' comp insurance to increase about $27,000 from the prior year. Other expenses in this department are budgeted similar to the prior year. For the administration department, the preliminary draft shows $539,000, and this represents an increase of 11% from last year's budget. Personnel for this department includes the city administrator, the administrative assistant, HR, and the city clerk. Personnel services were calculated based on the following assumptions for this draft. City administrator, potential increase to salary of 20% as contract expires in November. City clerk stipend remaining the same at $150 per month. And SEIU COLA for 3% that has already been approved. An unfilled HR position at a predecessor's hourly rate, plus the assumption of a potential 3% COLA for unrepresented employees. The estimation of the unfunded liability costs prepared by CalPERS to increase overall $47,000. An estimate for workers' comp insurance to increase about $27,000. And medical insurance costs assuming will be 10% higher. All other line items are budgeted similar to the prior fiscal year. Election costs are expected to be $10,000 to include the new TOT, the treasurer, mayor, and 2 council member elections. For the attorney department, which is page C3, the draft includes $110,000, which represents an 8% decrease from the budget from last year. The labor law consulting cost for union negotiations is unknown at this time. For the finance department, this draft includes $594,683, which represents an 8% increase from the budget from last year. Personnel costs include the finance director, business manager, and 2 account clerks. The personnel services were calculated based on the following assumptions. Potential 3% COLA and bilingual pay for unrepresented employees, anniversary step increases and hourly rates, discretionary based upon performance evaluations, SAU COLA of 3%, which has been approved by council already, potential temporary assignment during the Tyler accounting software implementation, estimated unfunded liability costs to increase about $47,000 overall. Workers' comp insurance potentially increasing $27,000 and medical costs increasing at 10%. All other line items for this department are budgeted similarly to the prior year. The professional services expense includes the new accounting software one-time and monthly cashiering and merchant fees, along with fees to HDL for the new service relating to sales and property tax revenue projection. For the non-departmental department, the budget in this draft includes $778,000, $778,507, which represents a 17% increase from the budget from last year. The proposed budget for this department includes the following assumptions. Operating supplies includes $19,000 for Surface Pros laptops to be funded by ARPA. Annual fees for compliance with GASB and SSA. Professional services include audit fees, DreamHost and Tyler Accounting Software annual fees of about $20,000. IT costs, including the monthly service amount paid to iTech Solutions, the monthly service cost to maintain the website, and $36,000 for website and chambers equipment upgrades allocated and funded by ARPA. JPIA estimated for insurance relating to crime, property and liability, an overall increase of $6,000. Animal service contract.
Night at work.
Trying.
Let's,
Okay, I'll just chug loud.
We have different mic.
Mhm.
we're trying the best we can.
Let me see if the
Okay.
handheld, let me see if the handheld will work.
Put a hand in.
Are these in there?
I don't know, maybe these work better.
Or all the same?
These are just the old technology.
Yeah.
Alright. Animal services contract to increase about $22,000. PPE cost of $4,000 funded by ARPA. The annual payment for the interfund loans with the enterprise funds and district funds. Capital improvements and transfers total $317,000 and include the following. Accounting software for $21,000, the general plan update for $40,000. Maintenance of effort for streets of $60,000, of which $40,000 is going to the street rehab project and $20,000 going to Measure A. Park improvements that include $40,000 for rubberization at the O'Connell Park and $150,000 for the Tocmasini Park improvements. Transfer to help the library fund to pay rent in the amount of $5,000. And that's it for that. The next department is the building maintenance department. The budget for this draft includes $377,794, which represents a 16% increase from the budget from last year. Personnel for this department includes the following. 10% of the maintenance lead workers costs, which is currently Rudy Gutierrez. 10% of the maintenance worker costs, which is currently James Pataya. Potential hiring of a maintenance lead, which is currently unfilled at a 50% cost going to this department. 50% maintenance worker of Juan Montero going to this department. Personnel services were calculated based on the following assumption. The new maintenance lead position to be approved, filled, and hired at a step A. Anniversary step increases in hourly rates, discretionary upon performance evaluation. SAU COLA of a 3%, which has already been approved by council. Estimation of the unfunded liability costs by CalPERS with an overall increase of $47,000. Estimate for workers' comp insurance estimated to go up $27,000. Medical insurance costs is going to be 10% higher. The proposed budget for other supplies and services for this department includes the following assumption. Utilities proposed at $50,000, which includes new costs for the new Leeward Park. Communications expense includes fiber optic internet and phones. Membership dues proposed at $7,000 for stormwater permit and other health permits. Operating expenses include $20,000 for finance and public works conference room upgrades funded and allocated by ARPA. Professional services line item includes the following. $46,698 and $30,876 for auditorium upgrades and vegetation maintenance respectively that were allocated and funded by ARPA. $1,000 to resurface the auditorium floor. $57,000 recurring cost for maintenance, $40,000 turf replacement at city facilities grant match. JPA provided an estimate for the liability insurance, which overall increased $36,000. All other line items were budgeted similarly to the prior year budget. In regards to the police department, the preliminary draft includes $3,218,800, and this represents a 17% increase from the approved budget from last year. Personnel for this department includes the following: 50% of Director of Public Safety's payroll costs go to the police department and 50% go to the fire department. 2 administrative staff, 2 temporary staff, 12 officers, of which 2 are unfilled currently, 2 airport officers and 1 school resource officer. Sergeant position, a possible lieutenant, code compliance, and emergency preparedness coordinator, which is currently unfilled. The personnel services were calculated using the following assumptions: the 2 unfilled officer positions to be filled at a step A and a step B, the unfilled emergency preparedness coordinator to be filled at a step A, sergeant to lieutenant promotion, 4% COLA to the chief per contract that is in place, anniversary step increases and hourly rate discretionary upon performance evaluations, SAU COLA for those SAU employees under the police department at a 3%, which has already been approved, potential POA COLA as union negotiations are underway. Overtime was estimated based on the current fiscal year trends through April 2022. Estimation of the unfunded liability cost was prepared using CalPERS, which it represents an overall increase of $47,000 and a potential increase overall for workers' comp of $27,000. Medical insurance, assuming, would be 10% higher. All other line items in this department are estimated based on annualized data for the current fiscal year and are similar to the prior year's budget with the exception of fuel costs for the rise in prices. JPA provided an estimate for liability insurance, which increased overall about $36,000. In addition, the cost of the generator is included and shown in the amount of $50,000, which is allocated and funded by ARPA currently. For the fire department, the budget for this preliminary draft of the budget includes $1,428,900, which represents a 7% increase from the approved budget from last year. Personnel for this department includes the following: 50% of chief's costs, battalion chief, which is currently unfilled, 3 fire captains, 3 fire engineers, PCS, and temporary staff. Personnel services were calculated based on the following assumptions: that a battalion chief would be approved and filled, a 4% COLA for a chief for his contract. It also takes into account recent negotiation with the union, anniversary step increases and hourly rates discretionary based upon performance evaluations, estimation of the unfunded liability costs prepared by CalPERS, assuming an overall increase of $47,000, an increase overall for workers' comp insurance of $27,000, and a medical insurance cost estimated at 10% higher. All other line items in this department were estimated based on annualized data based on the current fiscal year and are similar to prior fiscal year's budget, with the exception of fuel costs for rising prices. JPA provided an estimate for the liability insurance, which overall will be increasing $36,000. For the Parks and Rec department, the preliminary draft includes $390,172, and this represents a 20% increase from last year's budget. Personnel for this department includes the current manager, 10% of Rudy's costs, 10% of James's costs, who are the maintenance lead and maintenance worker currently, a potential of a maintenance lead worker at a 50%, and 50% of a maintenance worker, Juan Montero, the current facilities coordinator, which is part-time, and an event attendant. The personnel services were calculated based on the following assumptions: that the new maintenance lead position would be approved, filled, and hired at a step A. No ARPA funds to be used to fund the manager and lead positions. Anniversary step increases discretionary upon performance. SAU COLA at 3%, potential 3% COLA for unrepresented employees. Estimation of the unfunded liability to increase about $47,000. And the potential of an increase of $27,000 overall for workers' comp and a 10% increase to medical insurance costs. The proposed budget for other supplies and services for this department include the following assumptions: that the utilities and communications to be $85,000 and $4,000 respectively, to include new costs for Leeward Park. Equipment replacement includes $2,400 for lots. Operating expenses includes about $30,000 for rec programs, table, storage, concession stand allocated and funded by ARPA already. Increase in fuel costs. Professional services include $10,000 for a Central Park booster pump replacement. $40,500 recurring costs for maintenance. Again, JPIA estimated liability insurance to increase $36,000, and other line items are budgeted similarly to the prior fiscal year. For the building and permits department, this preliminary draft includes $296,360, which represents a 4% increase from the approved budget from last year. Personnel includes permit submission and an associate planner, which is unfilled. The assumptions used for the personnel services include that the new associate planner to be approved and filled at a step B, SAU COLA of 3%, temporary assignment during the planning and accounting software implementation for standing allocated and funded by ARPA. Estimated unfunded liability costs to increase about $47,000 overall, and $27,000 for workers' comp insurance, 10% higher for medical costs. The budget for this department includes professional services at $60,000 based on the assumption that the associate planner would absorb current consulting costs, $10,000 annual fees for the new planning software. All other line items are budgeted similar to the prior fiscal year. The cannabis department This department was not previously included in last year's budget. For the city administrator, there are no additional fees to be paid to HCL at this time for next year. In conclusion, for the general fund, overall, estimated expenditures for the general fund for this preliminary draft total $7,746,896, which are approximately 12% greater than last year's budget. As revenues are expected to exceed, I'm sorry, that is incorrect. As expenditures are expected to exceed revenues by $985,184, the estimated fund balance at the end of the year is expected to be in the red, about $158,000. City staff has prepared the following list. These are just recommendations or ideas to throw out there for council to help close this gap that we're working on. This list is to be potentially reduced or deferred to aid in reaching the goal of a balanced budget in which the revenues are enough to cover the expenditures at least at a break-even point. The use of ARPA funds to fund the Parks and Rec manager and unfilled maintenance lead would reduce costs of $160,100. The elimination of the 3% COLA for the unrepresented employees would reduce costs of $8,800 to the general fund. Renewing the city administrative contract for the same salary would save $31,800. The elimination of the temporary assignment at the finance department during the accounting software implementation would save $6,500. The elimination of bilingual pay for unrepresented employees would save $6,500. The elimination of the rubberization at the O'Connell Park and upgrades to the Tagmazzini Park would save $190,000. The allocation of costs hitting the general fund for the maintenance work for James Batalla to only hit streets would save $16,300. The elimination of the Central Park booster pump would save $10,000. The deferment of filling the 3 police positions, which includes 2 police officers and emergency coordinator for 1 year, would save a total of $319,800, or if deferred for 6 months, would save $159,900. And I have split up the 3 positions that I mentioned. The emergency preparedness coordinator, if unfilled, would save an annual amount of $109,000 or $54,500 for the half a year. And the replacement for the 2 officers are listed as well at a $107,000 and $103,000, or $53,000 versus $51,000 for half the year. The elimination of temporary intern positions for the public safety department, of which this draft includes 2 at the moment, would save $22,000. The elimination of the battalion chief position would save $148,000. The elimination of the turf replacement match for city facilities would save approximately $40,000. The elimination of lots under the Parks and Rec department would save $2,400. Postponement of the associate planner position would save approximately $40,000. However, city administrator and we mentioned that it would be more around $10,000. So we have to do that analysis, but it's around there. Reduce operating equipment and office supplies across all departments is another recommendation perhaps. Or the reallocation of the use of ARPA funds to increase the figure for revenue loss based on the assumption that the use of funds would be to fund current governmental services. Currently under ARPA is funding a generator, the website, and Adobe costs, PPE supplies, alternative, laptops. So perhaps we can find an alternative to save the ARPA funds, or reduce the public works conference room and finance office upgrades or the auditorium upgrades, or perhaps a library reallocation amounts or the differential for emergency services listed under ARPA. These items listed above, with the exception of the reallocation of ARPA and reduction of operating supplies across all departments, if you add them up, they result in savings of cost of about $1,010,200, which would be enough to have a balanced budget at this moment. However, city staff is seeking input from the city council as to which costs should be reduced or eliminated, or perhaps other recommendations that are not listed on this list. In addition, it is important to emphasize the sustainability aspect of funding recurrent costs with one-time monies. As it stands, the city is not sustainable long-term. As such, if we continue with exceeding costs over revenue, the city may no longer be able to provide or maintain its current services and may not sustain that along with perhaps job security to its employees. At this moment, I'd like to turn it to council before we proceed with other funds that are not general fund, and go from there. And then perhaps after we discuss general fund, we could go back to other funds.
There's a lot.
There's
I said there's a lot.
There's a bold spot somewhere.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's quite detailed. Let's start out with open. Anything you want to look at? You want to start with the last, what page? The recommendations? Yeah, page 10 and 16. I'll start with a couple. And it's kind of fighting a little bit of the elephant. You can't eat the elephant at one bite, but just like the O'Connell Park, the turf. I don't think there's a law that says that we have to have that. Which is where are we, 40,000.
No, rubber.
O'Connell, rubberization, and then 150,000 for Tognazini. Tognazini Park gets very little use. I don't know if you've been by there lately, so that I very rarely see any individuals there. I may be wrong. But I think that we can, as long as we, just like the new Leroy, that we use the chips there, and we use the chips at O'Connell Park. So right off the top, I would say we could eliminate that, we could save 190,000. This is not to say we have to go back into the department, looking at the department requests. As mentioned, that most of them, most of the department requests are above last year's amount, so these are the easy hit items in terms of what I see. There's small ticket items, and I know that there's others that want to see the big ticket items, but the one on, let's see, where is it? The turf replacement match, we talked about that last night. That's 40 grand. There's and I want to get into detail about the unfilled maintenance lead as it relates to public works interface. And how can we bridge that to where I know there's a need for park maintenance. Is there, we talked about the lead that would be the Rudy type, to where there's a lead specialist that would be on the park side of things. I'm asking staff in terms of, even Shannon, in terms of how can public works and parks interface in terms of expanding the role of that department to help cover the role that we will need, and the work that we will need at Leroy Park and Apollo Park.
I think Shannon has some ideas on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's probably 3 ways to tackle that. All the very different ways of hitting the general fund. So one of the first things that hits the general fund probably most painfully is to contract out the work. That is always an option. That contracted work isn't reflected in the budget as it is outlined right now. The second way is the way it's outlined right now, which is to have 2 leads, 1 lead in building and parks and 1 lead in streets, and then each one with their own staff person. There is a third way. I'm very ambivalent about it, but it is a third way to attack it, and that is to take the 1 lead, perhaps create it into more of a supervisor position, and then taking the maintenance workers that are that exist now, and maybe fill in the lead position as it lays now with perhaps a frontline maintenance worker instead, which is it's another way to outline it that may have a small reduction in costs. I wouldn't put a lead person over 3 bodies. So that's where that would become more of a supervisor position. But that is another way. So those are kind of the 3 different ways to do it. Contract, 2 leads, 2 maintenance workers, 1 supervisor, and 3 maintenance workers. But what that would end up doing is that would end up folding the park and facility maintenance back under public works. I'm not super excited about it.
So really what you'd be saving
Once
is,
you-
a little bit. I mean, you wouldn't be saving tremendous amount because you're just shifting a lead
Right,
position to a worker, and the difference between, is negligible in a sense, but there would be some savings.
okay, I think we can work that out. It doesn't sound like we can, generate a lot of reserves that are in additional money, but let's go right to the nitty gritty in terms of emergency preparedness coordinator, the replacement officers for Reyes and Bahina. Chief, can we look at that, Chief?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. First of all, I talked with finance, so we need a correction. That was not an elimination of the battalion chief, that was deferment. way we looked at to make this happen, as I stated last night, currently with budget and staffing, we have a fire department that's 100% staffing. We've got a police department that's 50% staffing. Only got 5 officers that are working right now that are available. What I looked at doing here and listening and even listening to some of our fire department and police officers. If we defer, it takes at least 6 months to 8 months to hire a police officer as it is. If I can just, so we'll have at least a 6-month deferment. But if I could try to do an emergency backfill and at least 2 police officers, that would help improve as far as safety. And that's going to be, I would not see a police officer in the field probably until maybe even January of next year, going through the background process. What I would look at is, I spoke to some of my other fire chiefs for a little direction, assistance on some other items. And they would assist in the sense of, if I could roll the emergency preparedness into a battalion chief, we made a correction. The lieutenant position is already approved. That's a done deal. That second level manager for the fire department and with the police department gives us operational ability. And I have that other expertise that would help to be able to assist me with running the fire department. And that's going to take at least 3 to 4 months to kind of fill. So with that, we have to permanent cost for a while to be able to assist the budget. The other thing too is we've moved some things. The 50,000 that we had over in ARPA, I've already spoken with finance. We'll move that out, move that 50,000 for something else to do. I'll be able to get something out of our police Proposition 172 funding and be able to deal with that as far as the generator. So using that type of math, I think gives us a huge cut to be able to help with the budget. Does that make sense?
You gained on it. On the disaster preparedness person. Where are we with that in terms, we had one before, we had a disaster preparedness person.
Yes, sir.
Okay, is that money still in that budget or no? It's not.
Yeah.
So we're looking at hiring, it's still in that budget.
Mhm.
Yep.
And when it's unfilled,
Yes.
okay.
And I could request be able to use that existing funding. It just takes me a little bit harder to find one that has an emergency preparedness background. But I could use that as far as battalion chief to kind of do 2 roles. But I would have to make sure my allocation for training, the funds right now for training, there's some deficiencies. And I think with having that position there available, and if I could find that individual that has that potential skill, we could definitely make that happen. So that's existing funding already.
Now, I'll throw this out there because I know that you're an expert in disaster preparedness. You could probably do that in your sleep, but not do fire, police over administration plus disaster preparedness.
That's
It wouldn't be fair to you.
Yes, sir.
Just thinking how we can, we've heard people in terms of what they want in the fire department. And I think our goal here is to make our organization work well, and that's the whole city. So looking at how we can look at the needs that are expressed by a lot of folks out here. Is what we're trying to get to. They're looking at a fire chief. I've seen some information that the fire, the union or the fire department wanted a battalion chief, but now it's not. They don't want a battalion chief. So how do we work that out? If we look at, the not hiring the disaster preparedness person, that's in the budget. So how do we work that? I need some. How do we figure that out? Yeah, with that.
Want the handhelds?
Good. That's it.
So I think before we can get into like the individual departments, we have to address first, I think the overall organization, as you mentioned, and having to fill that gap of almost close to $1 million. That's a huge one. And you started off with some of the ones that were like $40,000, those things like that, the easy ones that we're chipping away. Honestly, the way that it looks like right now, because we have ARPA, that is what's really saving us right now. That is what's giving us that crutch to be able to kind of hobble along until the next year, until we know what like cannabis, what these new measures, things like that really take into effect. I believe that this year is kind of like that stepping stone year where we just have to find a way of just keeping things as even as possible when we go with that. So I'm right now more partial to keeping things as status quo and looking at it back when we do our budget review in December and seeing what these new revenues will be able to help us do. So by status quo is, let's keep these on the books. We've done the things that we need to do to keep a lot of these things on the books for be able to hire. So that way there's not like the bureaucratic stop parts that need to stop us, like a job description of this thing or that thing. That has already been done. So my recommendation would be something of doing status quo. So that would mean looking at a lot of these recommendations and kind of going with those. Looking at the very first one that's on here is the Parks and Recreation Manager. I'm for keeping that right now and ARPA, because I know that what we all decided in the council was to have that DSL sustainable type of position on there, and it's not there yet. So it needs to get a little bit more time to get a little bit more traction underneath there. In order to do that. So that's an example of that. I want to honor whatever we negotiated. So if we negotiated COLAs for people, then we gotta make sure that we honor that, because that was what is right, and cost of inflation and everything like that going up. That seems like the only right thing to do. When it comes to things like when you went through each one of the items for revenues or expenditures, sorry, underneath revenues. We looked at the increases in there, and part of that is like the step increases. I think that right now it's one of those things where it's also, we have to keep things as status quo as possible for all those things, just to give ourselves the breathing room to see what the dust looks like after ARPA, after these tax revenues, after all these things. There's another thing that was hurting us is that Pasadena is not permitting anything this next year, and those permits have really helped us go on from year to year. But then it also showed a big hole in our city budget that says, if we get to the point where everything is maxed out in Pasadena and those development fees are no longer there anymore, what's going to keep us sustainable? And that's the job that we need to do with when it comes to the economic development. So we need to think past this year and think about how this is going to affect the years out to come for our budget, not just immediately what's happening now, but also kind of being proactive in the fall after that.
Now, you've heard me in the past talk about wanting to keep the recreation and parks manager and staff in a regular general fund budget. I do believe, though, that we will be seeing some positive increases in our income. It may not be generated from the different programs that are, it's just not there. You can't have a volleyball program or softball program and generate enough money to support that. And I think in the future, with the different things coming in with the taxes that I think we'll be seeing with, even with the Pasadena and the developments that are being made in terms of the apartment complexes and things like that. Some of the downtown businesses, even with there's not a lot of money in cannabis in the dispensaries, there will be, as soon as they're up and running, which is won't be till one of them will maybe the end of the year, maybe two of them will be the end of the year. I have no again, I said before that I would want the Parks and Recreation to remain in the general fund. And I have no problems other than a commitment that perhaps in the upcoming year that we look at a special district where it's just, we ask for the residents to vote on a bond or a measure to actually hone in just Parks and Recreation or fire or police, but I don't have any problems because I'm confident that we're gonna have resources in the future to maintain Parks and Recreation positions in a general fund. But we have to get through this initial hump. And so if we took that 168, I don't know where we are now, we're probably at maybe 500, if that.
So you still use ARPA for this to
Yes.
hold it, okay,
Right. Because it's there, and we have to use it by the
Yeah.
2024 anyway.
and then you can reassess. Yeah.
That's what, just like what Tony's saying, that we have to, we look at December and look at beyond that to see where we're at.
And then in the meantime, I mean, we'd miss oops, we'd miss a cycle for the assessment district, because right now, last night, we did the
Right,
tax, but it would have to be in next year, but you know, it's only a year away and that goes quick, so
yeah.
we could start working on what that means and put it together and see what that
We
could
have
generate.
2024 with our funds, so.
Yeah.
That assessment district would be key to us getting, moving forward on that. What are the other big ticket items, on the least in this reduction here? Everything, okay, everything? Now, again, I mentioned the emergency preparedness coordinator annual salary 109, half is fit for. It's in the budget now, or it's in the budget?
Yes.
So what happens if we delay that, chief?
I'm sorry, just so I can understand exactly what you're asking, sir, as far as to delay the hiring of that position,
Right,
then that falls on me until we can get that somewhat filled. I can appreciate, and I want everyone to really kind of understand our public and everything here. Prior to being here, there was no emergency preparedness coordinator, so it's interesting how that has now become a focal point, but it is imperative that we do have someone in that position. The only other person within our city that has even somewhat knowledge of it is our public works director in emergency preparedness as far as EOC operations. Preparing and getting all the supplies to be able for us to deal with its a citywide response is critical. We are lacking tremendously in that. We end up losing funds from the state. And we are mandated to have certain paperwork so that we can still be a viable community to be able to get some of those funds. So again, having that training is there. The person who works there, whether we incorporate into someone else, you know, it can be a matter of semantics, but they have to have that training. And I would advocate if we had a battalion chief that I could find that had that experience, put that together, and we deferred for half a year. That's almost $60,000 of savings for at least a half a year, because it will take that long before we can find somebody put in that position and make sure that they're trained and capable.
now we're kicking this around back to the battalion chief position. Any comments, other comments?
Yeah, I have two just in case. So this is a huge gap that we have. This shows how reliable we are on one-time money in terms of our Pasadena funds, on our building funds. how sustainable we can be with our current expenditures and the way we're operating is what we're looking at right now, right? In terms of that 49% that we're not going to see in our revenue. So I agree, we need to be as minimal as we can this year in order to stay afloat for the following years. So this means, you know, if we need to accept all of these recommendations, I'm okay with for this 1 year, accept all of them. And figure out what we can do halfway through the year and relook at our budget. When we get halfway through in December and see what our numbers are, where we're standing financially. In order to start making decisions for the following year. That's where I agree with all of these, and even if we can look further into those even step increases or anything else that we can reduce in order to meet those gaps, because we have some unknown costs that are not, that we don't have numbers for. So these are, that 900 doesn't really account for those unknowns that we are not able to put in our expenditures.
Like workers' comp.
Workers' comp,
Like,
yeah, all these other unknowns that we're unable to really put. And so in order to be a break-even point, we need to figure out something like that 1 million or a little bit more.
And that doesn't look at reserves.
And that, yeah, this is not looking at our reserves. We would not be getting any resources.
Only 4.
Staff, Todd, any comments on, and Lorena on actually taking these recommendations and applying them across the board?
I think only four employees would not receive a COLA, so it wouldn't equate to a ton, but,
No, we were talking about COLA, going with the COLA, but.
Yeah.
the
oh,
step-
okay, I got you. I do believe that, in talking with, Craig at Pasadena, that there's strong sentiment that that bridge is gonna be built, and once that bridge is built, there'll be, and I know we can't rely on, just monies for building permits and whatnot that we've relied on in the past. But once that bridge gets built, there's gonna be 5 more years of build out. Now, we can't always say that housing is gonna continue. There could be a great recession. But I think, building will be strong soon. It's just a matter of getting that bridge built, and it'll go like hotcakes, in my opinion. But you know, obviously, we don't know that for sure, but, I believe, yeah. And then, cannabis, it's not gonna be the cure-all, but I do believe that's gonna be fairly strong. I think, in terms of one position, I think we definitely have to hire an associate planner, because the building and planning department is the hub. It generates so much revenue. There's a lot involved with that, and one of our goals is economic development. Without a planner, it's real difficult. And it basically, if we have an associate planner, a lot of their the payback is really from the application fees. So there's just minimal sort of cost that would be ultimately from the general fund. If Larry goes, who is a retiree, you may not find somebody like that, and so you'd have to go to a firm that would cost probably $200 an hour. So I've calculated that with that position, Larry's average annual amount is that he's been paid over the course of 4 years is $70,000. Bill's 20, that's 90. The associate planner's fully loaded is 103. Now with that, they calculate any kind of permit application that comes back, covers a lot of that cost, and including grants that come in. So really, that position to me shouldn't be allowed to go forward. That's just my opinion, because otherwise we're just gonna have Bill at 20 hours a week, and that's not enough to do planning activity for a city that's growing and that we're relying on pushing for economic development to increase more sales tax and revenue, and getting, you know, the proper types of businesses here that will generate sales tax. That's my push for that.
So your recommendation right now is at 40,000 to keep that in there, as well as the COLA.
Keeping the COLA, keeping the COLA and looking at the stuff.
Right.
And I'm not sure about the steps might be something, I think it might have been challenged here at one time, and I don't know for sure, but I can check on it. I think steps might have to be continued, but I'm not 100% sure, and I'll get back to you on that.
So I don't know if you. Do any of you pencil that in real quick or?
Yeah.
Just to make my notes clearer,
Okay,
everything on this list is what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, everything on this list, except the COLA of the 3% to unrepresented employees. Switch that to what the calc would be for breathing any step increases for all employees. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep calls and stuff.
Yeah, keep colas, just not.
And it, just to understand on the public safety side, are we doing 6 months or the full year deferment?
I think
well, we don't have.
I think it's up to a year almost like, but we're looking at it again in that halftime period right there. Yes, Chief. If I may, and correction is. And I apologize, of course, I'm advocating for public safety. All these monies are already there within public safety. Budget as far as all these positions. And for us to, the way we look at it is, it's going to take time to hire these individuals. So that's our 6 months savings. And if I'm allowed to be able to, it's not my job to make everybody happy. It's my job to make decisions of what we feel is best for the city. And if I could roll over that battalion chief into emergency preparedness and be able to put those two together, that gives us another level of security. And we're not taking anything from the general fund, and we've taken out of ARPA anything public safety related. So any request, that there are no requests in ARPA for public safety funds. So we're pretty much staying pat what we have, just changing one position title to roll it into one, and trying to replace the other empty positions with money that are already budgeted. I think we still have a gap.
Yeah, we would
Yeah, we
still
still
have
have
a
a
gap,
gap.
like that's, yeah. We still-
But I understand, but like I said before, is right now, I'm only running with 5 officers in the field. And that's a huge gap, and people are here.
Well, yeah, I think if you eliminate that you don't have any room to hire someone.
I guess what we're saying, just for clarification, is the status quo and then coming back in December and reevaluating the recommendations from the staff, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Can I throw something out?
Sure.
And Chief, as far as your existing staff, I mean, if you were fully loaded without those 3, where would you be? Without the 2, you know what I mean? The 2 that are in there with the emergency preparedness, and then the other 2 that are unfilled. Where would you be if the others were totally filled? Because, some were gone now, would you be at 8, 9?
No, we would be at the 10 level. Well, when I'm saying we only have 5 working, we have
I know.
2 open positions. One was HR, if I can. One that's away from the department. I can say it. Okay. We have one that's in the queue to be hired someplace else. We should know within a week. We have one that's gonna be long-term for a while, and another one that's gonna be for another year that we're not gonna see. So,
What I'm wondering is,
those 2 will help us.
Yeah.
To be able to do it, because right now I'm on patrol.
right. What I'm wondering is you have, you're minus those 2 plus the emergency that's not filled. But you have the others that are budgeted and you want to fill them, how many is that? You know what I'm saying?
The other two would get us to 8 field officers working.
So theoretically, if you had those filled, you're budgeted for those and you wouldn't be down to only 5, you'd be down to about 8,
Correct,
right?
correct.
Well, what I'm wondering is if they're filled, you'd have more officers. But it's not because of the budget, it's more to do with hiring.
Oh, no, our deficiency in officers right now has absolutely nothing to do with the budget. We have the monies for prepare this person, which we were almost ready to hire. We have the money for the empty officer positions. It's just a matter of recruiting.
So I think what the council's saying, or some of them are saying, is that the 2 officers of emergency preparedness could be extracted out of the budget right now to minimize that difference. And then later, once the city's doing well, you could come back to get above that 8 or 9 officers that you currently have budgeted, but you're not finding them down here and filling them. Does that make sense? Or am I talking?
No, yeah, so
Is that?
I think what's being proposed here is for the deferment of those 2 officers and the preparedness coordinator. So that money would not be, we're reducing it so that we meet that gap of the $1 million.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree, and I think it's just semantics. If we start recruiting now, doing our process for a police officer, we wouldn't see a police officer for 6 months. So it's deferred anyhow, but if we don't start recruiting now, we won't see an officer for over a year. Does that make sense? So we're deferring on paper.
Right, so I guess what that would mean is that we can't actually hire until 6 months, 7 months.
That's what we'd be looking at. Yeah, they wouldn't be on our books until then. So, but we need to start the process now for all those positions, with the understanding that we would not have them full-time on our books until the end of the year.
Contingent on,
Yeah, go ahead.
and contingent that makes it into the next budget. Like into the budget review in December. That's what we mean. We're not saying hire, we're saying go through the process and I would hate to go down through the process of this and then be like, actually in December, we're still looking not great. We don't have the money for it. That's what we're coming from on this.
No, I can understand that, and I guess looking here, the money's already budgeted, so in a sense, we're saying we're not gonna make up, God forbid, we don't make up that gap. But if they were here, they wouldn't be part of the discussion anyhow. They're already working, so we really should not even be included, because we can say those positions are filled, so we're only doing it from a paper standpoint to say that we're saving for 6 months.
No, I understand, but the money is not there. We have $984,000 that we are in the black, you would say. So we don't have the money. And so we need to close that gap, and we need to look at what we can defer so that we can later have that money available.
And I agree, we can defer, but it's one of those things, if I defer, I'm gonna be paying overtime. So I'm paying one way or the other, but we can defer.
So what we can do is start the process of the hiring, but not actually have someone to hire until 6 months, when we can look at our revenue and see if we even have money to fund that person.
But you could still hire those positions within the
Right.
first 8 right now, right? Is that what you're saying? But the other 2 in the emergency,
Yeah. so
that's
these
what you're
other
saying,
2
extracting that out. for now.
Literally the recommendation, but
Yeah, those 2, but not, if you
And-
already have 8, then those 8 are,
Or good, you can hire.
Yeah, well, we don't have 8, I mean,
But you can hire.
I can hire that. And the only thing I would look for, so I can get out of this discussion to a certain degree, is, would you look at the option of rolling those two other positions that are deferred together? Whether the fire department agrees to it or not, but having the battalion chief, also the emergency preparedness role, since those monies are already there, I just roll them in together. if I can find a person that's suitable. And they'd be in the deferment also. I mean, they're part of that
You
deferment
have
also.
6 months to find that.
Yeah, I got 6 months to find that individual also.
Yeah, where's the money?
Yeah, you mentioned it's in the budget, but we're in the deficit side, so.
Well, I mean, if our emergency person hadn't left, he'd still be being paid, so it's been. A position's been approved and budgeted already. And the money should be there, but I understand we have the deficit, but I look at that the same way you said, it's just, give me 6 months if I can find them and. Hopefully, God forbid, we find them, him or her in 6 months, and they say, yeah, we still got the money, and then tell them, well, thank you for the process.
I think it's just because for this year, we don't have the revenues that we expected to have from our budget when we originally budgeted.
Right.
So because we don't have that, we need to figure out what we can reduce and how we can stay afloat.
So should we look to recruit for those positions, or are you advocating don't recruit for any positions or recruit for those?
Up to the
I
eight.
guess that's the
The-
part
the-
I'm.
The gap of the eight.
6 months.
Right, so I think I would go with these recommendations, right, except for the COLAs. And then so if you have eight, these two would be for later, like not hire until, you could start process, but not hire until probably like December, when we can reevaluate.
Yeah, well, I think that number's wrong, because I already have the 8. We're at 5 right now. If those are come on, we get to 8.
Yeah.
So I'm in the deficit right now with only 5. This only gets me to the 8.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
So
Makes sense.
the draft right now includes the 8, so you can keep the 8.
Yeah.
But instead of having 2 more, so that'd be 10, you would just not have 10 and keep 8 until 6 months to see if perhaps the situation is looking more positive, and then maybe get the other 2 so that you have a total of 10. Does that make sense? Is that overall?
That's what I understand. That's what I understand. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Okay, and so I'm sorry for making it. I'm sure everyone else I heard right. So my only one is then we still got the 1 position. I can recruit for it, as you say, but I'd rather roll it into the other position. I'm just changing the name of 1, and that's the emergency preparedness position. Yeah, if I can recruit for if we're going by what's on the thing, it says recruit for those, I can still recruit for those positions.
You can, if you can recruit and find the money, that's the thing.
Well, no, they're not coming for 6 months. That's what we're talking about. So,
Chief, do you have a sense of what a fire chief would make on a ground level? Step A or something, or just coming out of the chute, or mid-level?
no such thing. No, of course. Brand new.
In respect to those out there, there's 3 hands out there. Can one of them's? Who's the lead on this?
Thank you. Just a simple question, this can save so much.
And you are, sir, I know who you are, but
Just a simple question.
just tell who.
Oh, I'm sorry. Robert Doe.
Okay,
We live in Cassia.
right.
So simple. Combine the emergency preparedness, as the public safety director was saying. Why not combine the public safety director and the battalion chief into a fire chief position? That way, there relieves some of the duty of the shorthandedness of what the police department is going through right now. They can concentrate on their end. You hire a fire chief, they can take care of their own business, and they can answer to you guys and you guys only. Why not combine those 2 positions to a fire chief position?
You're standing there. There was a question in terms of the cost of a fire.
Of a fire chief.
Okay, why not, okay, the emergency preparedness, position is $109,000, if I'm not mistaken, that was the salary.
And the.
I do not know what the, I do not know what the battalion chief position is, but why not?
148.
Combine those two, and you come up with a salary for a fire chief, and then say pocket the rest.
But it seems to me that both these, you could almost get a fire chief for what this battalion is. And if I'm maybe speaking out of turn here, chief, I'm sorry, but if you were to give them a chief. And then you would be relieved of your time for chiefing. Then you could work on emergency preparedness because that's your expertise.
You can also go on, this department staff, properly staffed.
No, you would.
That'd be spread some thin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take one.
Todd, so you know, I was, my microphone. Hey.
Here, this one.
Can I ask Captain Matt to come up to the podium? Please.
Hi, off duty.
My question for you is, why don't you guys want a battalion chief at this point and want to push for a fire chief? What is the concept around that aspect for you guys?
Thank you very much for asking that. It's a very important distinction. It doesn't seem like important to somebody who wouldn't be in the fire service or have experience like yourself. But the key is that fire chief can advocate and can represent our guys. So that way we're not here bothering you all the time or in their off duties. We can focus on the boots on the ground job. And he can represent us equally at the table. If he answers to a boss, under you guys, nothing will get done. So a battalion chief is not what we need, like as a city, we need an equal representative for fire because a fire chief also he's gonna have the proper training, executive level training. And I know because I've taken some of these classes myself, that you get training for finding grants, finding special monies, being creative with the budget and then working with people and doing that job, as opposed to somebody who's just like got 20 years experience and they qualify. So that's why the distinction is, but I am very confident. I'm more than confident. It would be very easy to find somebody qualified with the proper training, maybe even retired that just wants to be a part of the fire service locally for the same cost of an emergency manager or a battalion chief. I know just because of the passion and the love for the service. I know I see it in every single one of us. We just, it doesn't die out. We just get older and then we have to retire because we're forced to. But, you know, that's the reality. I know we can find somebody qualified and they would be a huge benefit to the city, but that's the distinction between our chief and chief.
So years past, we've had fire chiefs that were part-time.
Right.
They only got paid for part-time, but they put in a lot of hours. So you're thinking we could find a fire chief to come in to get paid part-time wages that's retired because of CalPERS and they can only work so many hours out of a year after they retire. That would be willing to put in the amount of time that would be needed for you guys. You know, like you said, I was here 12 years ago. I did my due diligence, you know, nothing but love for you guys, but I've seen it, you know, I've seen the vision from when I was there to where we're getting to now. And I've seen our part-time chiefs, some being supportive, some not being. My thing is, I like the aspect of the battalion chief because eventually that can form to a full-time chief as we get going in that right direction. Where I understand where my other council people are saying was, we've always looked at before the one-time monies, you know, to be the savior to keep us afloat. And at this point right now, with not having any permits being pulled by Pasadena,
it's really reflecting on what's happening. And we hear you guys on what you're saying, we understand. But is there a means where we can come to where like the battalion chief might help get us going in that direction to the full-time chief eventually in the next probably year or so?
Personally, and this is just my view on it, other people may have other opinions. But if he has equal say at the table and his boss is the five of you, I'm good with whatever he's called. He can be called a battalion chief or a fire chief, but I'm confident you can get somebody qualified for the same pay as an emergency manager, which that has already been part of it. But I'm just seeking representation, that's all.
No,
But I just did a charity golf tournament the other day and talked with a bunch of retired fire chiefs. And all of them love Guadalupe and they all want to come out here and visit. So there's a lot of potential out there. Just saying.
okay, that's my question was, what was it from getting away from the battalion chief? Was the whole reason, my question for you, and you explained it, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So.
Erickson.
I have information on his salary.
Thank you.
I quickly texted expert in the field. And he said, you could estimate between 95,000 to 125,000 plus benefits. While I was sitting there, I quickly looked on salary.com and the median was about 82,000 and a high for a starting fire chief was a 101. So an average between them would fall probably what I heard the budgeted for the emergency preparedness coordinator annual 109. So you're falling within that range anyway. But the bigger thing, the bigger payoff is what Ryan is saying. I'll just echo it. It's the representation, it's the direct, is being able to lobby for the needs of his or her department. That's why you need a fire chief. And no disrespect to the councilman up there who is on the department. But in the past, there was a fire chief who was part-time, but there was also an assistant fire chief, my dad. So there was a different structure at that point, and I think comparing that to now presents its own challenges.
Thank you.
I'll be quick.
I can't see you.
That's why I want to come to the podium.
You're gonna have to, but
One was speaking, this one?
yes, sir.
Sweet.
Just your name, sir.
I'm Vince Culver, local F-116 Vandenberg.
Thank you.
I've been there 23 years. I've responded over here, responded with the men and women of Guadalupe, Casamelica for structure fires, for mobile homes on fire. And I'm just gonna tell you right off the bat, I work for a full-time department. What's that mean? We're all professionals here. These people in the back that work for this department are professionals. We all are professionals. We all are the same thing. So when it comes down to it, I've been listening. I'm hoping I'm the voice of reason here. That's looking from the outside in at your budget, at your whole process, and knowing Chief Carmen Johnson and working with him in the past. I worked at Helen Hancock at the fire academy. We're putting out fire cadets. We're putting out police cadets. Not understanding why it's gonna take so long. We got cadets right over here graduating right now. We got a lot of people here in this community and surrounding communities ready to go. This department has engines from 2000 to 2005. Our engines are over 20 years old as well, and we're trying to get them replaced. Sometimes we have the same problem. But the things I'm hearing are no ARP money, right? Or DARPA money. Lompoc use no DARPA money. If they didn't have a DARPA money, they would still have a $3 million surplus of money. Okay, I live in the city of Lompoc, in the limits of the city of Lompoc. $8 million surplus from marijuana. You're gonna get money from marijuana, tax it correctly. Okay, that was one of the things that came up when they first started letting it in. If you take the DARPA money away, they have $3 million surplus. That's a lot of money with full-time fire department and the police department. Looking at your guys' budget, the police department budget here is the same size as the entire rest of the budget on the pie. Kind of crazy to see that when fire is only 7%. Okay, you have how many people living in this city waiting for a professional to show up and help? 2 people on the engine, we ride 4. Per NFPA standard, 2 in, 2 out, right? Increase of public safety. I heard the chief here say he's concerned with the background of people's positions, making sure they're qualified, but he's not a qualified fire chief. In respect, he's a police chief. That's what he needs to do. And the gentleman summed it up perfectly by saying, you guys need a fire chief versus a police chief to run a fire department. You can't do both. It's not gonna work. You got too much going on. Okay, so keeping things even, but it's not even. Inflating, increase the price or increasing people's pay, but not in other areas. COLA increases, your guys' budget, like I said, I'm looking from the outside in. Okay, Vandenberg has a budget of the federal government, your money goes in the federal government, we spend it wisely. Sometimes people don't think so, but it's the same thing across the board. Our fire chief speaks to the colonel goes, that's his boss. Your boss as a fire department needs to be you guys. If he's gonna answer to another person that's gonna tell him no and not advocate for the firefighters there, when you guys are still running almost a half volunteer department and you're only growing, look at Lompoc, 2 stations. Surplus of money, start looking at that. It's there. You guys, if you take what I'm hearing now, which is, if he just said, if they don't hire police, there's gonna be overtime. There's overtime for the fire department. Anytime you don't hire, you have to keep people there. My wife's a nurse. Nurse doesn't show up, guess what? The other nurse has to stay there. Guess what? They have to pay that person overtime. That's common denominator, common math. When you get the gentleman here and you can't figure out how many he's got staff, and you guys are 10 minutes on trying to figure out how many policemen are on duty versus how many are going out the door. He's already overwhelmed with what he's got going on. This last part of this whole thing is the most important part. I think you guys, if you guys listen to what you just said, it's the most important part. Hire a fire chief. It makes sense. I've been doing this for 23 years at Vandenberg. I've been doing it for 24 years at the college. I was a reserve for Santa Barbara County. I had many battalion chiefs. You can't replace it with somebody else. The disaster preparedness person is the battalion chief. He said it, it's the same person. It alleviates him. If he's a subject matter expert at it, that's even better. That's 2. You have a fire chief and a police chief, always both respected on both sides of the table. Come together equally during a disaster, correct? Whether it's Katrina, whether it's the mudslides at Montecito, okay? When we showed up, there was an incident command. Who was the IC? Fire department. Who's right there with them and respected mutual assistance? The police department, Santa Barbara County Sheriff, the Coast Guard. If there's a disaster here, there's a lot of people coming. I guarantee you Vandenberg's coming. So think about that. That's all I got.
Thank you. Mac mentioned that he played in the golf tournament with, I don't know, it was firefighters or police officers, but I also play golf with a bunch of retired guys as I am. And about 5 of them are retired Santa Maria Fire Department. And one of them is retired, you know, Junior Saavedra, who was a fire person there at Santa Maria Fire Department. Also, his son is ready to retire at the Santa Maria Fire Department. And I've asked them when we actually brought in, we were doing about 5 years ago, really financial hard times. We were about $1 million in the red. And the county still, the county grand jury still tells us that we're not a good concern in terms of continuing as a city, because we don't have the 15% reserve. So when Ness came in, and some of you know Ness as the city administrator for Santa Maria, came in and helped us out. His recommendation was to combine, because we did have Carmen Johnson, we had I forget the other gentleman's name, retired fire guy, Jack Owens. It was interesting because there was a city administrator at that point that one of the fire folks had an issue with Jack. And then he talked to the city administrator, and he said, I have a problem. The fire person said he had a problem with the fire chief. And so the city administrator said, let's call you both in here and let's figure it out. But all of the individuals that I've spoken to regarding the Santa Maria PD, the Santa Maria Fire Department, and also Guadalupe Fire Department, believe that having a police chief, regardless, I think Chief Cash is an excellent man, an excellent leader. He does go to both sides of the fence to find out how the crew is doing. But all these gentlemen that I've talked to, fire department retirees and current, believe that there should be a fire chief. And but where do you get the money? You have we have a limited source of income. And I think maybe perhaps by combining what we talked about in terms of battalion chief and disaster preparedness, I believe that we need a fire chief. And how do we fund that? How do we get that without any distraction or any negative about Chief Cash? I think that he does an excellent job. And I do know that it's hard to split the two when it comes to managing the two. So were you gonna say something? Okay,
Yes.
go ahead, please.
I'm thinking about something.
Okay, good.
We haven't yet reached the discussion of ARPA. Originally back in October 2021, ARPA was allocated. We spoke of a generator for $50,000. What do you think of this idea? What if we work on hiring a chief, whether that's a battalion or a fire chief, within, you know, the next 6 months, just like the other police, but use the $50,000 from that generator to be funded by ARPA, just like the Parks and Rec manager is funded by ARPA, by that, you know, the lead position to also be funded by ARPA. Use the $50,000, which is half of what the resident mentioned would be the cost of the chief, about $101,000. So we can leave in the budget 6 months worth of the cost for fire chief to be funded by ARPA. And then, of course, we're gonna have to reevaluate the sustainability of these positions, you know, in the next budget year, like we would be for the Parks and Rec manager and the maintenance lead. It's an idea to have a chief, you know, to begin perhaps in January and fund it for the 6 months, you know, through June 2023, and then reevaluate. That's around the time when we start talking about the next year and have ideas of what the revenue would look like. We'll have an idea of what cannabis revenue would be like. So it's an idea. So it's worth thinking about. Of course, the sustainability aspect of these positions is a concern. But if the need is now and there's consensus for a fire chief, then there's $50,000 that we can use from ARPA. If you know the generator perhaps is not a need, maybe the chief is more of a need than the generator, we can think about using $50,000 this fiscal year for a chief and only think about the now, you know, but we have to keep in mind that we have to continue to think of the later,
Right.
which is a concern of mine, in my opinion.
What do you think, Council?
We go back to the same issue of sustainability and one-time money for reoccurring costs, which is our issue that we're facing right now. And this is not even looking at one position. This is just overall our organization and how can we sustain it? How can we maintain? This isn't just looking at a battalion chief. This isn't looking at anything specifically, but how can we fund a position, someone's employment, and say, hey, your job's gonna be up in 6 months. You know, we've mentioned it before when we were doing with the recreation manager. We said we wanted to be sustainable. That's why we did it with 1 year. We're looking at it later. But it becomes the same thing. If we are gonna do that, we definitely need to disclose that information to that individual. Say, this is a grant funded position. and the sustainability of you continuing to be on here is dependent on how we can stay afloat. And I think it's just a reoccurring issue. I think we need to figure out for this year is just status quo. So that we can later just look at what we really can afford.
I know at one time, within 6/30/24 is that, our money. Comments from council, any other comments from staff? Come on up.
I think that was, I think that's a sensible approach, is to keep everything status quo. But can you, commit to stratifying these? Because obviously, we wouldn't, well, I'm not saying obviously, but you couldn't get to all of these things. You could stratify them, so that the first thing you could get to would be, in my opinion, the fire chief, but whatever else is necessary to keep our city safe and running.
I think what he's saying is that, obviously probably is to prioritize those positions and those wants. But by staying status quo, but then set an aside prioritization of these points
I think
and those points.
that feeds back to our goals in terms of staying in the black.
Yep.
Public safety, public safety
Recreation.
and parks and recreation. So my personal thing is that we need to hone in on being in the black and not getting into the red. So that's why we're looking at this. How do we reduce this side? How do we reallocate some of the ARP money? And like Lily says, it's one-time money, but it's the here and now. You're correct in terms of stratifying these things because you have to prioritize them. So how do we take the request for, or the thought of a discussion about a fire chief, and how does that meld into what we're looking at for the next fiscal year, 2022-23? Where does that, we haven't even gone into the details of the departments in terms of what we can cut back. If we can cut, I'm sure we can cut back, because we're gonna have to. Comments? Go ahead.
Okay, there we go. All right, like I said, like Lily saying about the status quo, I think that's important to know. I don't think, I think the what is it, the intention, I don't know if that's the right word, but we're not arguing with anybody that we need a fire chief. I think we need one. Like that's definitely something that we need. I think that what we're saying is give the city the time, and the city, and I mean like not just like the organization of the city, give the city a time to be able to reevaluate what is going on. We prioritized yesterday, for those of you who were able to tune in yesterday, exactly what those goals were. And number one was incorporated to have all those things about public safety, have public works, all those things. That feedback was given. Like that's the number one thing that we know, that once we have greener pastures, that we're able to make things happen. You know, it sounds to me like there's some things on the, as still the words from Captain Mac, is that there's some boots on the ground that may not be happy with the current structure, and we may need to reevaluate that structure. But the budget process is intended to have the priorities of what the cities are, and number one priority right now is to make sure that we get back into the black and that we have money to stay sustainable as a whole. Now, there might be some regret later. That's kind of like there's never a 100% foolproof plan for anything. And those of you in public safety know that you can plan and train and do what you need to do, and you may not always get the outcome that you desired at the end of the day. And that's how we're looking at it for every single one of those departments that are looking down at us right now, or up at us right now, because the way it is. But I understand the need for the fire chief. I mean, in my prior occupation, I got to work primarily with fire people in the field as the counselor for that, to be able to help them get their education, to be able to move up the ladder, to be able to do all the things they need to do. And was able to actually make some really cool connections with people all across the state on that. So it was, I learned a lot. I learned that if you talk to someone who's been in for at least 5 years, they're gonna give you a binder worth of certificates. So they're kind of, that they've had all this amazing training to be able to do. So I think that this year, status quo, follow these recommendations, all the things that we talked about. And I mean, it sounds like we already have 2 people who are on that boat. We just need the third to be able to move on. Because I think now we're just kind of going a little bit. circular.
Gentlemen, anything on this side? It's complex, that's for sure, so.
Can I just say one thing? I'm literally gonna be 30 seconds because I just have a question. I'm Teresa Dovey. I live in Pasadena. If you already have allocated money for the emergency management position, why can't you use that money for the chief? Why can't you allocate that?
If we look at our budget as is, we're almost $1 million in the hole.
So that's an area they could cut. Because we're in the hole by $1 million. For this
But
year.
the budget this year is different
Yeah.
than the budget last year. If there's less money, there's not the
Yeah,
same
Not the
revenue.
same revenues. So we have to look at,
It's very-
and we've been running without some of the positions anyway, but we had the money budgeted, but we don't have the revenue to
Okay.
cover it.
You're not, nobody can hear you. We can't hear you.
That would be trimmed if you took the 3 out.
Yeah, because we're moving.
Just, yeah, wait till you get up there and we can all participate.
Yeah, for sure. Just a quick question. Do you hear me? Would this, keeping the status quo also include keeping this 42% of the budget for the police department?
No, you'd
No.
be reducing that 42%. Yeah.
Okay, so that would be inclusive of the promotions, the increases, the annual increases, all of these other additional perks.
So we're looking into that. We're looking into the step stuff. We're looking into all that. Yeah,
Okay.
all
that
that.
was
So it's clear across. It's not
all
just one.
across.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my only question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, next step. Lorena.
Okay, so I wrote down my notes, everything on this list except the COLA replace that for the sets is what I have. To make updates for this, draft of the budget and then, we'll be coming back with the changes after I run those changes through in the next council meeting, which will be June 28th. Does council have any other comments or specific questions on line items for the general fund before we move on to other funds?
I don't, I think we spent enough time on that.
All right,
And Lorena, it might be beneficial for just
to go over
distinguish
the list.
some of these, like, what they are, like categorically, like what they mean. That how they're different from the general fund, how enterprise is different from.
Yeah,
that.
okay, I will do that.
So like maybe a little brief introduction about what
Yeah.
those are.
Okay, so I will begin with the other special revenue type funds. So this is not general fund, these are special revenues that are dedicated to special projects, specific projects. First grouping are the public safety funds. So these funds, there are 2 funds, one for fire, one for police. So these funds house certain monies that are Proposition 172 funds. And so these funds have to be used a specific way. So currently, the Chief Cash has requested that no budgeted expenditures should hit these funds for now, as he wants to save up and use them for certain equipment for public safety. Moving on to other special funds for streets, we have Measure A. Budgeted revenue for Measure A for the proposed budget is $676,000, and this was estimated by SDCAD. This represents an increase of 17%. It also includes revenue from the general fund from the Chevron grant for streets in the amount of $60,000. The budget for Measure A includes the following personnel: Public Works Director, Engineering Technician, Maintenance Lead, Rudy Gutierrez, Maintenance Worker, James Batalla. I've listed assumptions used to calculate the personnel costs, which I've listed. I don't want to go into the list, it's very repetitive. But it is listed on the screen. The proposed budget, there's certain big ticket items that I wanted to bring up in regards to Measure A. $45,000 for replacement of a utility vehicle, $13,000 for equipment for tree survey, an increase for fuel costs, $5,000 for the removal of trees from the native garden, $105,000 for an urban forest plan, and then the transfer to the general fund per the draft cost allocation study. Capital improvements are estimated to be a total of $610,200, and they include the street rehabilitation, sidewalk repairs, and storm drain improvements.
Just a quick clarification. These funds right here, the special funds, particularly like the Measure A's and enterprise group, those are very specific funds, right? So we can't just use those money for like other things to be able to keep up the.
We cannot, unfortunately, we cannot. Another street fund is the gas tax. This is also a very specific fund for special uses. The revenue for the gas tax fund is proposed at $351,000, and this represents a 12% increase from last year's budget. The budget for expenditures for this fund are $705,353. And these include capital improvements related to the street rehabilitation project. The LTF fund is estimated to receive $9,270 to be used for sidewalk repairs. The SC1 RNA, this is also, it's state funds. State funds, yes, state funds are estimated to receive $190,000 to be used for street rehabilitation as well. This other one is similar, SC1, Safe Routes to School, is expected to be for next budgeted for the construction of pedestrian improvement. The ASIC grant is expected at $200,000 for the 11th Street multimodal path design project. And then we move on to enterprise funds. The water operating fund is expected to receive $2,626,000. The revenue for the water operating fund has increased 3% based on the recent increase in rates. And we'll also be including a connection fee, a revenue for connection fees related to Escalante Meadows. And then in the budget, we included the other side of the turf grant, which would essentially go away if the general fund. No, go ahead, Jen.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna add some clarification regarding the turf rebate. There were two pieces to it. One was very specific to public facilities and the other one was specific to turf rebate for the general public. So the one that you've eliminated from the general fund was the funding that we were going to put into if we were in fact to do some turf replacement for city facilities. This one specifically for the water enterprise fund is what we would do in order to provide the match to a grant turf rebate program that we might be able to get in on with the county, so that if the general public wished to do turf replacement, they would come in, and they're recommending that the city provide a 60% match and have 40% be part of the grant. So the $40,000 revenue from the grant would then be matched up with $60,000 out of our water fund to match that in order to provide an opportunity for our residents and commercial customers to be able to replace turf. Thank you.
This department includes the following personnel: Public Works Director, Engineering Technician, Water Supervisor, and Water Maintenance Operator. Big ticketed items for water include, $115,000 for the reroute of the Confidential services. $45,000 for the replacement of utility vehicle. $25,000 for backup well motor for the Pasadena well. $10,000 for pump replacement and increase in utility and fuel costs. The straight water purchase of, the decrease, right? Yeah, the decrease for the CCWA projection. $100,000 for the climate action plan, $40,000 for the shortage contingency plan, $15,000 tank inspection, $20,000 water atlas update, and then the turf replacement, which you said should be $60,000, right? And then moving on to the water capital, the budgeted amount for water capital projects of $1,065,387, which includes partially the financial accounting software, which is allocated with the enterprise and general fund, the elevated tank repairs, the advanced metering infrastructure, SCADA improvements, West Main water line, and then the Bonita tank demolition. The wastewater operating revenue is budgeted at $2,269,300. And this includes a 3% increase based on the recent utility rate study. And then connection fees related to the Escalante Meadows development project. The budget includes the following personnel: Public Works Director, Engineering Technician, the wastewater supervisor, wastewater maintenance operator, and the brand new operator and trainee. The big ticketed items for the wastewater fund include an increase for utility and fuel costs, $48,000 for an aerator, $70,000 for a tractor, $80,000 for grid system replacement, which actually should be higher at about $130,000. $80,000 wastewater master plan, $50,000 annual jetting expense, $20,000 sewer atlas update. For wastewater capital projects, we have partially financial accounting software to be funded by wastewater, effluent irrigation pump station rehab, Highway 1 lift station, and the AIPS vaults. In regards to solid waste, the solid waste fund received a Cal Recycle grant for the organic recycling. In regards to transit, the transit fund is budgeted to receive revenues of $2,566,305 and includes several funding from CARES, ASIC grants, TRISA, LCTOP, and 3CE. And the following expenditures reflect the following: Public Works Director personnel costs, additional advertising for the new transit plan, vehicle maintenance, contactless pay, increase in fuel costs, increase to smooth contract, and $1.8 million for infrastructure improvements to include EV bus and charging and Amtrak train station design. Moving on to miscellaneous special funds. The library fund has been estimated to reflect an expected impact fees to be received from Pasadena and a $5,000 transfer from the general fund to help pay for rent. The rent costs for the library fund will be reduced from $15,000 that is listed on the report to $11,000 based on an additional amount contributed by the Friends of the Library.
Hey.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you, Shirley.
Yeah.
Take a note when we have to pay our own rent.
Let's see. The Public Facilities Fund is budgeted to receive funds from the Escalante Meadows Department. The Park Development Fund is budgeted to receive funds from the Escalante Meadows Department as well. The CDBG Fund and the Park Development Fund currently have an interfund loan related to the Leroy Park project and is expected to be partially repaid when the project is complete, which it now has been. The Capital Facilities Fund houses money from the People Suffered Housing and the Pasadena impact fees. And this is to be used for public infrastructure and public safety. We have prepared a program of projects to use these funds for council's approval which is attachment 3, and it includes $70,000 for public safety equipment, which includes fire turnouts, SCBA breather, fire hoses, exhaust capture, and crime prevention cameras. For capital improvements, it's a total of $459,537 for the American Legion wood repair, police electrical upgrade, public facilities master plan, auditorium stage and chambers repaired, and pedestrian improvements. If these funds are used up as listed, the fund will be running out this fiscal year. The City Hall Equipment Fund also and Traffic Fees Fund receive impact fees from Pasadena. City Hall Equipment Fund includes a budget of $25,000 to be used for City Hall equipment. The Traffic Fees Fund budget includes a transfer for capital improvements for the street rehabilitation amount of $120,000. And then we have a couple of CDBG funds that we're expecting for the following projects. We have a CV1 grant of $84,676, the micro enterprise grant of $250,000, CV2, CV3 grant of $308,128, the Central Park grant for $4.8 million, the Leroy Park Phase 2, $1.7 million, and the Urban Forest for a grant of $170,000. The lighting and landscape district funds include revenues reflected based on prior year information and expenditures also based on similar to prior year budgets, with the exception of the additional Pasadena Lot 5 electrical and landscape costs. The successor agency funds include revenues estimated based on prior year. This includes the CDBG grant for $5.1 million for the Royal Theater. The capital improvement projects is attachment 2, and it lists all the capital improvements, which we've already discussed in the prior departments. And they total up a whopping $20,228,699 for public improvements. The last item that I have noted here, I have a summary of the ARPA, which is attachment 4. The total award to the city was $1,860,000. The city received the first half of $930,930 and is expecting to receive the next half here pretty soon. The council has approved and allocated a total amount of $1.7 million back in October when the discussion was initiated. It is estimated that by the end of June 2022, the city would have spent $330,000, 606. And this proposed budget for 2023 includes the use of ARPA per this draft of $1.2 million approximately, of which $484,000 is going into the general fund for expenditures. $30,000 remaining for the Los Amigos of Guadalupe and $707,000 to fund capital projects. That concludes my report. I'm open to any further questions.
Thank you, Marina.
Thank you a lot.
If only it was legal to move some of these funds around the general fund. Yeah.
Don't talk about that.
Yeah. We'll end up like the city of Bell.
Oh.
On the miscellaneous special funds, the capital facilities fund, 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph regarding, we talked about this before, American Legion repair. What was that, 140 grand that we were talking about?
I believe it's 70 grand.
70 grand?
That's 70.
70 grand in the narrative.
Oh, okay, there it is, which includes 7, that's public safety.
Oh, it isn't like 140.
I think it was 140.
140 between the two. I think.
Termite repair American Legion, $70,000.
Was there any?
This is attachment,
Okay, yeah,
attachment 3.
now, we've talked about this before because it was allocated, so we talked about some of the enterprise funds. This is not an enterprise fund. So that money could be moved around where we needed it to be moved, so. What do you need from us?
At this point, I think I got what I need to make the updates to the general fund, which really was where we made the changes.
Right.
And I have a couple other miscellaneous changes, related to other funds. But then it'll be coming back on June 28th to reflect the changes, and we'll see how it's looking, with the resolution at that point.
Okay. All right, any other comments from the council? And now I can ask you in public, is there any comments from you? You all ask comments, because it's coming back in a couple of weeks, so. All right. Lorena, thank you. And everyone out there, thank you. Again, it's, what we're trying to do is make the organization, which is the city, as best we can, based on what we have. We've heard a lot of good comments, a lot of experienced comments, a lot of complexity in terms of the money side of things, and we'll get to it soon. Yeah, a few more revenue streams. The next item is item 6. Is there a motion to adjourn? I'll motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Excuse me, wasn't there a letter to be read,
It's back there.
but not read to?
No, it's back. It's in the back.
Yeah, but not read into the minutes.
It's in the back, and will be included in the minutes.
Sure, people take it.
There's a second? Is there any, was there a second?
No. No,
Done.
I will second.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All ayes. You need to, thank you all. And staff.
Where can I find it?
What if I?
Yeah, I'll go through the
They're actually.
Let's wait, let's wait, let's wait.
I just.
It's one time, one, two. Let's wait, let's wait.
Oh, some other stuff. Okay, very minor. Okay.
Did you get it shut off?
Sorry. I don't know how to.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for tonight. You guys are all valuable.